share the results of my study, which investigates the relationship between familiar socioeconomic status and children's time use patterns in Singapore. Parents and families, as we know, can provide a different type and different level of resources to children, depending on their socioeconomic status. Actually, it is a familiar story. Rich children get a lot of opportunities to get some resources to assist their development, such as toys, learning materials, sports equipment, musical instruments, or private tutoring, and so on. Then, how about their time? Okay, let me talk about my story first. This is one of my favorite records. I'm really enjoying good cello instrumentals, but I cannot play the cello. In my childhood, on my timetable, there was no time playing the cello because I did not have the cello. My mom did not buy me this one, and actually my parents had never heard the sound of the cello. So taking cello lessons could not take priority on my childhood timetable. As a consequence, I have become an adult who cannot play the cello. This like me, time is very one of the important assets for child development, and as what activities children spend their time on shape their daily lives, and the accumulated daily lives make their whole life. In this paper, we examine children's time allocation in early childhood as a manifestation of parental investment of resources. So this is my research question. Let's take a look at my study together. Okay, let me talk about young children's time use first. As I talked to you earlier, time use in certain activities shapes an individual's life. How children spend their time before they attend school affects their early development and may have significant long-term implications for their later development. Children's activities help stimulate their brain development. Brain scientists are saying that early childhood is the critical period, which is characterized by high plasticity in the brain. The development of the brain promotes developmental adaptation in various regions, including cognitive and social emotional competences, even their physical development. And these developments in early childhood bring lifelong benefits for individuals, such as greater achievement in school period, or competent social skills, and overall high quality of life. In our study, we specifically focused on time use in these 4 activities that numerous studies have found to be closely related to child development. Sedentary time, including media time, has been considered unhealthy if too much, and excessive media time takes time away from investing in other productive activities. And contrary to sedentary time, active activities have been shown to have positive effects on children in various aspects of their development. Many studies have shown that active plays and sports allow children to cultivate concentration, develop social skills, and reduce stress and depressive moods. Achievement-oriented activities indicate educational activities such as playing a musical instrument, drawing, reading, and studying. These kinds of children's activities are closely related to their cognitive or emotional development. And time spent in their school, like educational institutions like preschool, daycare centers, or private tutoring, is also related to children's overall development. In spite of the importance of child youth before children attend school, the study of children's time before school is very limited. And most studies examining children's time use have targeted school-aged older children. Another limitation of previous studies is that they have examined parents' time use with their children, and most of them spotlighted the unequal childcare time between couples, Of course, these kinds of studies using parents' time diary have their own contribution. However, preschoolers spend their time not only with their parents, but also with others, actually significant others. They spend their time with siblings, grandparents, or even domestic helpers at home, and with teachers or other children in a preschool or playground. So when we take a look at the diagram on the right side, this is a famous figure representing Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory. So we can see the diverse context in which children interact and are exposed, in addition to their parents. And there is another limitation of using parents' time diary to observe children's time use. The reported time parents spend with children often includes a father's or mother's time spent with all the children in the family rather than with a specific child. In short, for these reasons, it is important to investigate young children's daily lives in diverse contexts using their own time diaries, not their parents' ones. Furthermore, a lot of studies have used stylized questions to measure time use. The example of stylized questions is like this. How many hours does your child spend watching TV per day? This way is known to be unreliable, actually, compared to the time diary method. Most studies using the time diary method, unfortunately, have been conducted in Europe or America, but there are only a few studies in Asian context. Additionally, there are a few studies examining young children's time use with their own time diary. Then, what is the time diary method? Okay, let me introduce this method of measuring individuals' time use more accurately. Okay, here is an example of the time diary. The respondents are asked to record the type of activities, begin time, end time, location, and accompanying person. Of course, there are other versions of time diary. Anyway, after data collection, researchers classify the recorded information by the respondents into pre-existing codes like this. This is a sample of activity code we used in the current study. Okay, the data from the time diaries provide a reliable estimate of time use. Attitudes and norms can influence the respondents in a questionnaire using a stylized question, whereas the structure of time diary we've seen before properly leaves out this kind of bias. When respondents are asked about their time use with a stylized question, people reporting many hours of paid work, they tend to overstate the actual number of worked hours. And men overestimate their unpaid work time, while women overestimate their paid work time, but women underestimate their unpaid work time. Parents also underestimate their unpaid work time more than non-parents. But when measuring an individual's time with a time diary, however, it is not easy to be influenced by social norms or their prejudices. So with the time amount in the 4 activities measured by time diary, we took a look at their relationship with family socioeconomic status. This is a description of socioeconomic status defined by American Psychological Association. Actually, I don't think we need to discuss the importance of family socioeconomic status in detail. Tremendous studies have already found the importance of family socioeconomic status on child development. And socioeconomic status is often measured with education, income, and occupation. So in the current study, we examined the relationship between family socioeconomic status and preschool children's time use in these activities. Among the familial socioeconomic status particularly, we wanted to spotlight parents' education level. Okay, let me talk about a trend of educational assortative marriage in Singapore. We hypothesize that parent education is the key factor that shapes how young children's time is organized. Singapore is one of the highly developed, well-off countries with socioeconomic and cultural diversity. Singapore has experienced one of the most rapid modernization process known in the world in terms of the demographic transition, rise in living standards, urbanization, and increase in educational attainment also since the country gained its independence. Female education in Singapore has risen phenomenally. The female gross tertiary enrollment rate grew from 4% in 1970 to about 95% in 2018 and surpassing that of men. Women no longer have educational disadvantages in almost all high and middle-income countries, and scholars have documented a global trend of a decrease in female hypergamy, the pattern of women marrying off. Instead, education homogamy, also called assortative marriage, and female hypogamy, referred to as marrying down, have increased recently. Singapore is no exception. Among the nation's total marriages, we can see that both the university group has increased and the men high, women low group, the yellow color, has decreased. The overall educational assortative marriage rate in 2009 was 64.9%, summed up the green color, but in 2019, it was 67.5%. These changing marriage patterns have implications for the distribution of resources available for child development. The rise in educational assortative marriage could bring an increasing polarization in children's well-being. The high group, that is both the university group, magnifies the advantages each parent brings to the marriage. In this context, we wanted to answer this research question. How do family socioeconomic status shape young children's time use pattern in Singapore, a country of Southeast Asia that is highly developed and diverse in socioeconomic and cultural characteristics of its population? Okay, now let's move to the empirical study. To answer our research question, we use the data from Singaporean longitudinal early development studies, as known as SGLES. The principal investigator of this project is Professor Jiyeon. The core panel study was conducted in 2018 and 2019 by the CFPR at the NUS. This data has a nationally representative sample of 5,019 preschool children ages 0 to 6 in 3,483 households. This data oversampled the low-income population, so sampling weight was used in all analysis in this paper. From the SGLES core survey, we analyzed the children's time diary data, 5,013 weekday diaries, and the same number of the children's time, the same number of the weekend diaries. Okay. Adult respondents recorded children's time diary on tablet PCs, and about 99% of them were the primary caregiver of the children, and usually mothers. We used old time diaries of 5,013 children to get descriptive statistics, but for the multivariate analysis, we selected 4,717 children living with both parents, because one of the key variables we are mainly interested in is both parents' education levels. This is the sample diary we provided to the respondents. And here is the activity code we used. Using these categories, we calculated how much time Singaporean children spend their time in each activity. And among these 12 activities, okay, for multivariate analysis, we use the time amount of these 4 activities as independent variables. which are closely related to child development. Okay, this slide shows our final research models. In the multivariate analysis regression models, we have these 4 dependent variables: the time spent in electronic device use, achievement-oriented activities, sports or other active play, or time in school, daycare center, or extracurricular lessons. And child's gender, age, and race, and the number of children under 18 within the household were controlled. And the key independent variables are parental education level, household income, and mother's working status. Okay, let me introduce our independent variables in detail. First, for education level, we made 3 categories: secondary or below, labeled low, and post-secondary or diploma, labeled mid, and bachelor's degree or higher, labeled high. Then we combined father's education and mother's education, so that made a variable of parental education level. The parental education level has 5 categories into 5 dummy variables. 3 of education assortative marriage groups, both low, both mid, and both high. And 2 of this assortative intermediate group, with the mother having a higher education level than the father, female hypogamy actually, and mother having a lower education level than the father, female hypergamy. The distribution of the parental education level actually aligns pretty well with the national statistics we've seen before. And the second one is the family household income. The median annual total household income per capita in our study was about 20,000 Singapore dollars. And the quartiles of the annual total household income per capita was used in the form of 4 dummy variables. The third independent variable is the mother's working status, categorized as not working mother, part-time working mother, and a full-time working mother. Here's the descriptive statistics of 4 dependent variables. As you can see at the bottom, there were a considerable number of children who had no time in each activity. So we therefore utilized the Tobit modeling. Tobit modeling with the actually the sample multiply imputed by chain equations, multiple imputed data. The Tobit model is a useful specification to account for math points in a dependent variable that is otherwise continuous. The math point of our study is 0. And an individual can decide whether to do a certain activity or not. And if they do, they can decide how much time they spend in the activity. So in the Tobit model, therefore, the total effect is composed of the probability and the intensity. Now I'm going to share the results of our research. At the first, let's take a look at the Singaporean children's overall time using various activities. We can see that Singaporean preschoolers spend most of their time on sleeping, napping, because they are young children, with the expected pattern that children sleep longer on a weekend day than on a weekday. Time spent in eating or being fed was about 1 hour and 43 minutes on a weekday, and significantly more time on weekend day, 2 hours and 20 minutes. And on a weekday, the largest proportion of waking hours was time spent in institutions such as schools, daycare centers, or private institutes. And as expected, on a weekend day, children spend very little time in school or daycare. And unstructured non-active activities in sky blue color, such as doing nothing and free play, also occupied a large amount of time. For an achievement-oriented activities, in the yellow color, the children spend about 28 minutes per day on a weekday, and both on a weekday and a weekend day. Media time is quite high, actually, in red color. On a weekday, Singaporean preschoolers spend more than an hour using electronic device on average. Most of them was in watching TV. 47 minutes for watching TV, and 20 minutes for other electronic device using. And on a weekend day, for electronic device use, children spend about 1.5 hours. Children spend considerably more time in both social activities and sports or other active play on a weekend day than on a weekday. For sports or other active play, weekday time was 20 minutes, but weekend time spent was 53 minutes. For travel, children spend about 40 minutes on a weekday in pink color, and an hour on a weekend day, either by food or by vehicles. On our website, the CFPR website, you can find more information about Singaporean preschoolers' time use pattern by their age group. And as noted in the multivariate analysis, we focused on these 4 colored activities during waking hours. Okay, we can see the differences in children's media time depending on parents' education level. On a weekday, a child of both low-educated parents spend more than 100 minutes in using electronic device use, but a child of both high-educated parents spend only 45 minutes, less than half of that. And on a weekend day, the amount of time is much more, but the patterns are similar. The pattern for the time spent in achievement-oriented activities was the opposite. On a weekend day, the average time of children with high parental education level was the most, 38 minutes, while that of children with low education parents was 18 minutes. We have seen these differences without taking into account other variables to be controlled. So now let's move to see the results of Tobit regression. The marginal effects of Tobit model for a weekday time use of Singaporean preschool children are presented here. We observed the large differences in children's time allocation by parents' education. When other covariates were controlled, parental education level was still negatively related to child's time spent using electronic devices in red color, while it was possibly related to the time spent in achievement-oriented activities and sports or other active play. For electronic device use, compared to children of both parents with low education, labeled both low, child of both high parents spend about 32 minutes less, and a child of both mid parents spend about 40 minutes less a day on electronic devices. And a child whose mother has a higher education level than the father spend about 40 minutes less on a weekday in electronic device use than the reference group. For the time children spend in achievement-oriented activities, a child of both mid and both high parents spend about 10 minutes and 20 minutes more than a child of both low. And a child of an educationally dissociative mating couple spend about 9 minutes more per weekday than a child of both low parents. As the time spent in sports or other active play on a weekday, a child of both high parents spend about 9 minutes more than a child of parents both low. And on a weekday, there is no significant difference in child time spent in school or daycare by parental education levels. Mother's working status is also a significant variable on a weekday. For electronic device use, a child of full-time working mother and a child of part-time working mother spend about 80 minutes and 60 minutes less than a child of mother who is not working. And for achievement-oriented activities, a child of full-time working mother and a child of part-time working mother spend about 11 minutes and 7 minutes less than a child of mother who is not working. And compared to a child of mother who is not working, the predicted time on sports or other active play for the child of a full-time working mother spend 12 minutes less. Contrary to other activities, as expected, the mother's employment status was the strongest predictor of children's time in school, daycare, or other private institutes on a weekday. A child of full-time working mother and a child of part-time working mother spend approximately 2 hours and 40 minutes and 1.5 hours more than a child of mother who is not working. Annual household income per capita was not significantly associated with a child time spent in using electronic devices or in school when other covariates were held constant. However, it was possibly associated with the time a child spent in achievement-oriented activities and sports. Compared to a child in the lowest annual income group, children of second quartile, the third quartile, and the fourth quartile spend about 7 minutes, 12 minutes, and 12 minutes more per weekday in achievement-oriented activities, respectively. For sports or other active plays, children of the second quartile, third quartile, and the fourth quartile spend about 6 minutes, 8 minutes, and 8 minutes more than children in the lowest annual income group. On a weekend day, the gap by parental education level was much greater. When other covariates were controlled, we also observed that child of parents whose education level is both high at the bottom spent about 40 minutes less in electronic devices and 23 minutes more in achievement-oriented activities and 18 minutes more in sports or other active play compared to a child of parents whose education level is both low. There was also a small but significant positive association with the child's time spent in school on weekend days. Mother's employment status was only associated with child's time in school, daycare, possibly for a weekend day, but with a much smaller magnitude than on weekdays. Meanwhile, annual household income was possibly related to child spend time on electronic devices, and it had a positive relationship with a sports time or school time on a weekend day. Compared to a child of the lowest income group, a child in a household of the highest income group spent about 32 minutes less in electronic device use, 21 minutes more in sports, and about 7 minutes more in school. Okay, this slide shows the marginal effects of control variables. On a weekday, compared to Chinese children, Malay and Indian children spend about 20 minutes more in electronic device use per weekday, but spend less time in school or daycare centers. Malay children spend about 1 hour and 24 minutes less, and Indian children spend about 1 hour and 36 minutes less than Chinese children in school or daycare. For sports or other active play, Malay children spend 6 minutes less, but Indians spend almost 25 minutes more than Chinese children did. On a weekend day, compared to Chinese children, a Malay child spends about 18 minutes more, and a child of other groups spends 26 minutes more on electronic devices. A Malay child spends about 10 minutes less on achievement-oriented activities, and 6 minutes less in school, daycare lessons than a Chinese child. And Indian children also spend 6 minutes less on achievement-oriented activities than Chinese children did on a weekend day. But there was no differences in time spent in sports. Okay, finally, we are on the summary page for today's talk. Based on children's time diaries, which are considered to be more reliable method than the stylized questions, we examined how family socioeconomic characteristics affect young children's time use pattern in Singapore. During children's waking hours, we focused on the time they spent in the 4 activities: electronic media time, study time, sports time, and school time. And the parental education level, the combination of mother's and father's education levels was a key stratifying factor influencing children's time spent on these 4 activities. We examined the hypothesis that increasing educational assortative mating put children's developmental resources in divergent paths as reflected in their early childhood time allocation, which may widen the developmental gaps between children of different socioeconomic statuses. So we observed that parents' education played a key, critical role in shaping how young children spend time on these activities. We found large gaps between children with parents of different educational attainments. Over a week for 7 days, compared to a child whose parents both have higher education, a child whose parents both have low educational attainment spends about 4 hours more in electronic devices, almost 2.5 hours less in achievement-oriented activities, and about 1 hour and 20 minutes less in sports or other active plays. These weekly differences amount to very large differences over time. Singaporean preschoolers' time use patterns also varied by their mother's employment status. On a weekday, a child of working mothers spends substantially more time in school, daycare center, or private institutions, but less time in other activities outside of the schools. Although household income had a weaker relationship with children's activities relatively, a child from a high-income family spend more time in activities promoting their development and spend less time in electronic device use. These results reflect the income effect on parents' investment in children's development. So let's take some implications of our results. The average time among Singaporean preschoolers spent in electronic device use was more than 1 hour on a weekday and about 100 minutes on a weekday, even they are young children. On the other hand, their active time, including sports or other active plays, was only 20 minutes on a weekday and less than 1 hour even on a weekday. These numbers did not meet the criteria guided by the World Health Organization, WHO. Furthermore, children from the disadvantaged group, they had more screen time and less time in active activities, as well as achievement-oriented activities. These time patterns during early childhood lead to a long-term impact on their development, as shown in previous research. And these gaps tend to be widened in their later life. The increasing authoritative made in Singapore may contribute to a more polarized society through the divergent pattern of intergenerational transfer of resources to children. And we observe these intergenerational transfers through children's time use patterns in this study. Policy interventions, therefore, should be provided to reduce these gaps in early childhood and prevent inequality from widening. Policy interventions could support parents to teach and guide their children's daily life in a proper way. However, at the same time, the circumstances of the disadvantaged parents must be taken into account when policy interventions are provided. Think about the time use of the working mother's children. We need to make more efforts to develop the way that policy programs are delivered directly to children to enrich their lives without recruiting poor but very busy parents. A possible limitation of our work is that we did not focus on explaining the racial differences. The racial differences found in children's time use patterns in Singapore may reflect cultural differences among these racial groups. Further researches addressing this issue are needed, and your valuable insight about this issue would be appreciated. And second, children's time with parents may contribute to portray the influence of parental investment on children's development, manifesting parental time resource investment. So we are preparing now another study analyzing children's time with their fathers related to Singaporean unique context of having live-in domestic helpers and grandparents. We ask your continued interest and support in our time diary researches to be released by the CFPR SGLIS team. That's all. Thanks for your attention, and please get in touch.
Thank you so much for such an insightful presentation. The floor is now open for questions. Okay, I have a few questions. So this was, Shuzhou, please speak up.
Hi, thank you, Jiyeon, for this very insightful talk. And I get one question that's in the parental education, you have two groups that are like whether the mother's education is higher than the father's, and whether the father's is higher than the mother's. So because you did not explain in detail the purpose of having these two groups, and as I thought in the results, these two groups they seems to be like quite similar in their effect size, and their effect size is close to the both middle educational groups. So could you explain a bit of their motivation and the results? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yeah, actually, our main interest is the difference between the low income, low education group and the high education group, actually. So we focus to explain the difference between two groups. But yeah, there are, we need to explain the coefficient of the female hypergamy and female hypogamy group. But we think that there is not much difference between two groups. Sometimes mother highly educated groups.
Jiyeon, sorry, could you just go back to the slides? It would be helpful for all of us to see.
Thank you. Yeah, here.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, the when you see the achievement-oriented activities, the coefficients are similar, but it is lower than the achievement-oriented activities. But sometimes it is the opposite. So we cannot say that there is a consistent patterns. The difference between the father highly educated groups and mother highly educated groups. So yeah. But we think that actually, when we made the female hypergamy and female hypergamy group, this group is very mixed group actually, because when when the mother has low education and the father has mid education group also included in this group, but father has a high education group and mother has a mid education group also included in this group. So I think this group is very mixed group. So yeah. We don't think that we need to give more explanation on these groups.
Yes, I agree. I agree with your explanation. So I'm wondering, like, whether like the highest education among the parents make more sense, or I don't know. Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, as you mentioned, that these two groups, they are like a mix of different scenarios, and they are like 1/3 of the sample. So I'm wondering whether it's hypergamy or that really makes it make more like have more larger impact, or is the highest education among the parents? Like, we don't need to care about which one is higher. We just need to know the highest educational level at the household. So that's my thought.
Yeah, that could be one. One could be there. That could be alternative options. Actually, we try to divide it those two intermediate groups. So at the first, we had 8 dummy variables, but we thought that it's too much and too hard to explain the differences. So we decided to focus on the difference between the both high group and the both low group, and we try to justify the importance of the studies to present the educational stratification society in Singapore. So yeah. Professor Jean, do you have any answers to reply?
Yeah, we've actually started looking at mother's education and father's education separately. And both father's and mother's educations are important, but that is nothing very interesting because probably everyone knows that parents' educations are both important, and maybe mother's education is a little bit more important than fathers. So that is not something new. What we wanted to show is this trend of divergent disparities of resources that are invested in young children in the society that is important to for people and policymakers to pay attention to, because this, as we show, the assortated marriage trend is increasing, and it's an important aspect to pay attention to. So it's not just, we don't just want to say that both mother and father's education are important, but we want to say on top of that, because there's a more high concentration of people marrying their same kind, so to speak. And that would create an increasing, an even higher level of inequality in child development, starting from very young children. That inequality is likely to increase later on in adulthood. That's why we created this, this variable to show that. But as you can see, the biggest difference obviously is those who are, you know, both parents are high and both parents are low. The middle three groups, we've actually done a test for the coefficients, equality of the coefficient. And those three groups are not very different, we agree.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. May I invite Professor Adam Chung to ask his question? Professor Chung?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for the very interesting talk. Actually, I think the findings about the relationship between the SES and the children's time use is very important. So actually, I typed the questions. So I have questions about the potential mediating mechanisms, because so do you have any variables in the study, for example, like parental aspirations or parenting attitudes or the parental skills? Because I think it's important to know about the relationship between SES and children's time use, but what explains it? I think we need to know that in order to provide effective policy interventions, right? Sometimes maybe because different parents believe in different style of parenting, or actually they actually believe in the same thing, but they don't have the time or they don't have the energy to do that. So I wonder what is the potential mediating mechanisms to explain the differences. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Cheng. Yeah, your comment is very valuable. And actually, at the other seminar, my colleagues presented the relationship between the family SES and the parental aspiration, or like the parenting attitude, actually, the child rearing expectation. And there were a significant relationships between those variables. But in this studies, actually, our focus was just a relationship between the family SES and the parental, family SES and the children's time use. But yeah, your explanation could be possible. So in our future studies, when we have a plan to figure out the types of children's time use, like play high group or study high group like this. So when we figure out that kind of groups, we will see the differences between their parents' expectations or parenting attitudes. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Andrew, may I invite you to ask your question, please?
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Dr. Lee, for the insightful presentation. I think the topic is extremely important for our society. So in your second last slide, you highlighted how, you know, disadvantaged parents are already extremely busy trying to put food on the table, right? They're just trying to earn money. And that this should be taken into account when we think about the interventions that we can do to try to help preschoolers have better, more conducive environment for their cognitive development. So what kinds of interventions do you foresee, you know, which do not involve parents? Because it's kind of hard to not involve parents, right? To build that environment available for them to use their time appropriately. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I'm not familiar with the Singaporean intervention programs, but in my country, many policymakers just concentrate on to provide the parenting programs to the parents. But they don't have a time to attend that kind of program. They are very busy to earn their money to feed their children. So I think we need to develop and we need to invent a program just for the children, which they can participate even though they cannot bring their parents. So yeah, I think that is a very broad concept about the family policy interventions for me. Yeah, but if the floors have a very good idea or insight, then we can discuss more. And yeah, please share with your idea. Yeah, Jean.
I think one important ways for of intervention obviously is to focus more on the early childhood education, preschools and early preschool. Now I think preschool start at 4 or 5 here, but we found that there's still about 10% of the household, 10 or 15% of the low-income family household actually do not send their kids to preschool, and that is a very important thing that we're studying as well. So encouraging parents to send their kids to preschools is one way, and other countries started earlier than 4, so 3 to even younger than that. Quality and affordable childcare obviously is something that would be good to at least reduce the a lot of time watching TV at home for the low-income group. The other intervention obviously is to provide resources for the low-income groups. On the other study, you can see that materials like books, simple things like books, there's a large gap between what different families of different socioeconomic status have. So some of those things, food and basic needs, food, books, and library materials that can be free, provided access to the low-income groups, that will be good. Obviously, I think involving parents is important. At least have them understand what kind of activity is good or bad, not so good for children's development. And that sort of parenting materials and resources needs to be provided. They do not need to always come to a program, to a different place to participate. I think technology now has enabled us to send messages to them via phone, for instance, to remind them what are some of the things that they could do with kids, and to provide them with, if they're going to be watching TV and on the internet, then give them the resources where a healthier and more educational sources are, and that may not require parents to go to a center to learn how to be a good parent. So I think there are different, more creative things that can be explored for sure.
Thank you so much.
And
Thank you.
Can I add more comments on this question? Yeah, and actually, in this era, we have a sharing economy, and when we think about the Head Start program, we can borrow the book, toys, or that kind of things. We can share the learning materials, stimulating the children's development. So yeah, that is one option. And the other one is that even though the government provide the subsidies for the preschool or daycare centers, I feel that low-income families, they are non-accessible to that kind of information. So we need to, the government has to promote their policy and introduce their policy well to that kind of people who are not easy to access that kind of information, I think.
Thank you. We have another question. Mr. Eugene Tan, may I request you to ask your question?
Hi. Thank you, Dr. Lee, for your presentation. Basically, I just wanted to ask about the analysis based on racial groups towards the end of the presentation. So I just wanted to clarify the rationale as to why the analysis was conducted such that the Chinese children's experience was used as a reference group for other racial groups. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Because the Chinese group is the largest group among the 4 racial groups, among the CMIO. So when we select the reference group, of course, there is another option, but usually the largest group could be a reference group, and it is more stable statistically. Yeah.
Yeah, if I could just add that this is statistically, it doesn't matter who's the reference group. You can use Malay as the reference group too, and you get the same kind of difference. So the decision of making which group as reference group is not, it's a statistical one. And like Jiyeon said, because they're the majority of the groups and it's easier for comparison. We have done with Malay as reference group and Indian as reference group. The numbers all come up to the same. It is just a statistical decision.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof.
Okay, if we have no other questions, then I have a question. Thank you, Jiyeon. That was a very interesting presentation. What I am interested in inquiring about, if we have characteristics of the caregivers, and if we know more about the household structure. So in my observation of Singaporean families, I realized that grandparents do take on a significant share of child rearing, especially when children are young. So even if the mother is working, oftentimes the children are being looked after by family. And of course, I think that would also have some bearing on time use patterns. So I think it would be interesting if in the future, you could also explore the role of grandparents. And you said that you would be looking at that. And also their own educational characteristics. Maybe it's a second paper, but that would be interesting as well.
Jiyeon, why don't you talk about that? We do have that paper already.
Oh, wonderful. Please do share.
Yeah. I mentioned that we have that kind of, we are preparing the articles related to that topic, but thank you for your comments, but unfortunately, we don't have information about the other family members, right, Jean?
We do. We have everyone.
Do we have characteristics of educational characteristics of the grandparents?
We do.
Oh, wonderful.
Wow.
Well, at least on the second wave we will have.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah.
I think that's another paper, and it should be a very interesting paper.
If the grandparents live in the household, we will have that. And next wave, we're getting ready for the second wave now, and if we might, I think we're adding questions about that, even if they don't live in the household.
Oh, excellent.
So yeah, so we have time with grandparents. Grandparents spend with kids, and we have time that domestic helpers spend with kids, and how that affect parents' time spent with children, and that's another
picture.
Yeah.
Yes,
they are important. They are important. Yeah.
But
I
can give a preliminary results of that kind of research. interestingly, the grandparents and domestic helpers only take over the caring time, not their study time, like achievements or sports or not that kind of thing. They only take over the caring time from their parents, like the mothers or fathers. Yeah,
and travel.
Yeah, travel, right?
And
exactly.
travel time.
Like commuting to the childcare, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it affects father's time more.
Okay. We have one more question from Diego Fernando. May I invite you to ask your question, please?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And I think this question is related to a previous topic. And by looking at the table in slide 43, I can see that parents with higher education, then the kids from those parents are going to have more time in achievement-oriented activities. But also I will assume that these parents are the ones with a higher labor supply. So they are the ones who are more busy working because they have higher wages. Then my question is, are these parents paying for someone else to make the investment? And so basically what we are going to have here is the effect of income from high income families on the time allocation, or are they just better at managing time and allocating resources?
Yeah, thank you for your comments and questions. Yeah, as we know, actually the family socioeconomic status is a combination of the education, income, and occupation, actually. So yeah, maybe the effects of SES is mixed. But yeah, you're right. The high income, I mean that when they work a lot longer time in a higher occupation position, they can earn more money and they can provide more like toys or paying the tuition fees like this. But yeah, I think the higher education, higher income is very highly related thing. So yeah, but I want to say that even we control the family's income, then the family education level is still very significant for the children's time. Yeah.
Jean?
Yeah, I think you can see the additive effect of all the different socioeconomic indicators. You're right about that. And the point of separating weekday and weekend time is also important. So you can see that mothers who are working, their kids spend more time in schools, which presumably they're learning something, social skills or cognitive skills and other things. So that's what you were talking about, they're buying services from institution as well. But on weekend, they do spend more time with kids on other activities. And actually, there's emerging research that shows that high SES parents in the whole, they work more, but they spend actually more time with kids as well. And by cutting back their, mostly for mothers, cutting back on sleep time, their other socializing time and other things. So it's not a direct trade-off of you work, then you spend less time with kids type of thing.
Yeah, seems like you become more efficient at managing your time, right?
The super moms like Kriti.
And I wanted to note that our dependent variable is not a time with the parents, just children's time. So yeah, we can say that the higher education model, they have an ability to manage their children's time, like managing the timetable for their children, go to the daycare center, and after daycare center, they can go to the private institute, learn the violin or cello like this.
Yeah. We have one last question, and after that, we will have to end this very stimulating discussion. Andrew? May I invite you to
Yeah,
ask
sure.
a question?
Just a quick question. Is it very onerous to sort of implement this time use diary method? And how many days of data were collected for, let's say, the weekday compared to the weekends?
Yeah. Thank you for your question. We collected children's time diary for 1 weekday and 1 weekend day. Yeah.
Okay, so it's just 2 days. So it's not like too onerous for the child to keep working on the diary across, let's say, about a month or so.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Cool. That's fine.
So-
Thanks.
Yeah.
The methodology is not easy. Obviously, it's a lot more difficult than the stylized question of how much time you spend with kids, or
Right.
how much time does kids spend with someone. The setup cost is high for collecting this data. The recall demand for primary caregiver or whoever's reporting this is also high, and they have to go through 24 hours recording that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It takes about 15 to 20 minutes to go through one diary.
Right.
So 2 diaries could have an hour, 40 minutes, depending on how quickly they do this. There's a lot of methodological studies about how this can be done. We choose random days for them to do. Well, not quite random days, but we try to have a week even distribution among different weekdays. But we asked them to recall yesterday, and the closest weekend date that they have, they could remember. So it's easier for them that way. And we use the laptop to do this. So in some ways, these are, most of the time diaries were done with hard copies before, and now we're going online. And so there are some innovative methodologies that we have implemented this time.
Totally pieces. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. Is this paper somewhere where we can retrieve it to read in more detail?
We're preparing for publication.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you all for joining us for this wonderful presentation. And thank you, Jiyeon and Jean, for conducting this very valuable research. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.